I have kept the armory of the Ansarin for 41 cycles, and in all that time I believed one thing without strain or doubt, that a creature you have disarmed is a creature you have answered. This is not a sentiment. Among my people, it is closer to arithmetic. We are the Veshtani, and where other species pass down songs or bloodlines, we pass down the index of arms, the long catalogue of every weapon ever recorded in known space, the blade and the lance and the coil gun and the slow chemical things that empty a lung, each entered, measured, and ranked. To keep the armory is to keep a fragment of that catalogue, and to apply its single oldest law to the living. A being is a threat in exact proportion to what that being carries. Take the carried thing away and the threat is gone. A hand, we say, is only a hand. I no longer say that. I want to set down, carefully and in order, why. We took the human crew during a sweep along the Veral Shelf, where the salvage drifts thick, and the law is whatever vessel arrives first with the heavier hull. Theirs was a small tender, scarred and patched, hauling cut metal out of a dead freighter that our charter said was ours to hold. They did not fight us. I want that understood from the start, because of everything that followed. They powered down when our cutter put its shadow over them, and they opened their own locks before we could cut them, and they came across into our hold with their limbs loose and their faces tired, the way beings look when they have decided that resistance costs more than it buys. There were 6 of them. By doctrine, we treated them as detainees of the lowest order, which is to say, we treated them as cargo with opinions. Processing a detainee is the part of my work I once found restful. There is a rhythm to it. Each is brought into the receiving bay under the white panel light and the strip-end scan begins. We remove everything: tools, fasteners, the hard caps from their boots, the metal threaded through their garments, anything with an edge or a mass or a stored charge. Then the deep scan runs them head to root, mapping every cavity, every implant, every swallowed thing, because beings hide weapons in places that would shame you to imagine. When the scan comes back clean, the detainee is logged, given the gray shift cloth that has no pocket and no seam to worry, and walked to the hold. The logic is old and it has never failed us. A being processed this way carries nothing. Therefore the being is harmless. Therefore the being may be held by 2 guards and a sealed door, and the armory need not concern itself further. The human who gave his name as Garrett Soil came through fourth. I remember him because of how little there was to remember, which is its own kind of memory. He was not large. Among his own crew he was neither the biggest nor the most armored in manner. He had the look their old ones get, the skin gone loose and weathered at the joints, a gray growth across the lower face, eyes set deep and slow. He moved like a being who had spent a long working life and expected to spend a little more. When my staff took the tools from his belt, he watched them do it the way you watch someone fold your blanket, a small courtesy he had no intention of refusing. When the scan arm came down over him, he held still and breathed and looked at the ceiling. The scan returned clean. Cleaner than clean, he carried not even the small forbidden comforts most working beings tuck into a seam, a blade for cord, a striker for fire. Nothing. He had handed it all over before we asked. Tier 4, my second, an officer named Sevet Orr, read off the log. Tier 4 is our lowest. It means no weapon, no augment, no record of violence on file. It means harmless. I confirmed it without looking up because there was nothing in the man to make me look up. It was Sevet who looked up. Keeper, she said, in the low register we use when we do not want the detainee to hear. Watch how they wait. I watched. The humans had been walked to the hold one at a time, and each, once inside his cell, had done a strange thing. He had found the others through the transparent partitions and met their eyes and held them, a long, steady, deliberate looking before he sat. There was nothing furtive in it. They were not signaling a plan, we monitor for that, and there was no pattern, no rhythm, no code. They were only counting each other, confirming a tally. 6 in, 6 accounted for. Then each sat against the wall, facing the door, hands open on his knees, and waited with the particular stillness of beings who have agreed among themselves about something without needing to speak it. Prey doesn't wait like that, Sevet said. They are not prey, I said. They are detainees. They wait because waiting is all that is left to them. Read your own log, officer, Tier 4, they carry nothing. She did not answer. I marked her uneasy and thought no more of it, because I had the law and the law had never been wrong. I went back to my armory and to the work the index always sets a keeper, the slow remeasure of our own racks, the logging of a coil lance the boarding party had damaged, the quiet pleasure of a catalogue kept current. I did not think about the human garret soil again until the hold went loud. I should explain what the hold was so that you understand there was nothing in it. A Veshtani holding cell is stripped to the bone by design. Smooth walls, no fixture a being can pry, light from behind sealed panel, air from a vent too fine to reach. There is a bench fixed and seamless. There is a waste recess. There is nothing else. We do not furnish a cell, we empty it. The whole architecture of our holding is the same doctrine the armory keeps, expressed in metal. Remove every object and you remove every weapon, and what remains cannot hurt you. A Veshtani in that cell, disarmed, would have been as harmless as we believe the human to be. This is the part I keep returning to. By every measure my people have ever trusted, the room was safe. The danger was not in the room. We had walked it in ourselves and called it Tier 4. The trouble began over the youngest of the crew. Their tender's manifest had named him as a junior hand, barely grown by their reckoning, and he had not waited the way the others waited. He had paced. He had pressed his hands to the partition. Twice he had asked in the trade can our translators carry when they would be released, and twice the standing guard had told him nothing, because nothing was what the guard had. By the third watch the young one had worked himself into a state our medics flagged, breathing fast and shallow, and the protocol for a detainee in distress is to move him to the medical recess for observation. It is a kindness in our way. It is also, I see now, the single act that undid us, because to move him we had to open his cell and put hands on him. And to the watching humans, it did not look like a kindness at all. It looked like one of their counted 6 being taken out of the count. I was not in the hold when it began. I have watched the capture since, every frame of it, more times than I can bear to admit, so I will tell it as the capture tells it, which is to say slowly, because the instruments slow it down until you cannot look away. 2 guards entered the young human's cell. He resisted, not violently, a flinch, a pull back of the kind any frightened thing makes, and 1 guard took him by the upper limb to steady him. To us it was procedure. The grip was trained, controlled, no more force than a handler uses on any detainee. But across the hold, through the partitions, the old human garret soil came up off his bench. He did not shout. That is the detail the capture caught that no witness reported, because it happened faster than a witness can hold. He did not bang the partition or call out or make any of the displays a cornered being makes. He came up off the bench in one motion, already moving, and his eyes went to the floor of his own cell, to the one imperfection in our perfect empty room. Here I must confess a failure of my own cast. Some watches earlier, a maintenance arm had serviced the panel light in Garrett's cell and against regulation had left behind a fragment of its work. A short length of ceramic spar, broken at one end, no longer than a finger and lighter than a coin. It was not a tool. It had no edge worth the name. By the index it was nothing, too light to be a club, too blunt to be a blade, too small to be anything at all. If you had handed it to me and asked me to file it, I would have called it debris and discarded it, and I would have been right by every law I knew. We do not strip such things from a cell because there is no weapon in them. A hand is only a hand. A shard is only a shard. Garrett's hand closed on the shard. What happened next took, by the instruments, less than half a beat of a Veshtani heart. To the eye in the hold it was not even a motion. It was a flicker, a thing the guards felt the end of before they saw the start. But the high capture caught it whole, and I have walked through it frame by frame so many times that I could draw it in the dark. He drew the arm back. That is the first frame that matters, the limb cocked behind the shoulder, the small mass held loose in the fingers, the whole backside of the body wound like something being loaded. In the next frames, the wind unwinds. It begins not at the arm but deep in the trunk, a rotation that travels up through the hips and the spine, and the shoulder lags behind it on purpose, stretched, storing the turn the way a bent spar stores the force you put into it. Then the arm comes through, and the shoulder releases what it stored, and the limb whips forward faster than the body that drives it, faster than the muscle alone could move it, because the muscle is not doing the work at the end. The stretched tissue is, snapping back, hurling the small mass off the fingertips at a velocity my instruments logged and my mind refused. The shard crossed the hold. It crossed it in a line so flat the capture barely shows a curve. It passed between the partitions through the open service gap, and it struck the guard who held the young human in the soft place beneath the skull ridge, and the guard was dead before the sound of the throw finished reaching the far wall. I felt the alarm through the deck before I understood it. By the time I reached the hold, my detail had the situation contained in the only way they knew, the young human pinned, the old human cell sealed to vacuum ready, weapons leveled at a being who stood behind the partition with his hands once more open and loose at his sides, breathing, watching us the way he had watched us fold his tools away. My guard lay where he had fallen. The medics were already telling me what I could see. Nothing to be done. A single small impact, precisely placed, fully sufficient. He had nothing, Sevitz said. She had drawn her sidearm and she had not lowered it, and her voice had a fracture in it I had never heard from her. Keeper, I logged him myself. Tier 4. He had nothing. Search the cell, I said. They searched it. They found the shard where it had not landed and the broken end where the maintenance arm had left it, and nothing else. No cache, no edge, no smuggled charge. They found exactly what the law said a Tier 4 cell contained, an empty room and a harmless being. The being had killed across that room with a piece of debris I would have thrown away myself, and the law had no entry for what had happened, because the law had never imagined that the room was not the danger, and the shard was not the weapon, and that both of them were only along for the work the body had already done. I went to the partition and I looked at the human, and the human looked back at me. Through the translator, I asked him the only question I had. How, I said. He was quiet a moment. He was not afraid. I have seen enough fear across enough cells to know its shape, and there was none of it in him. There was something else, something I did not have a word for then and have since decided was a kind of weariness, the look of a being who has done a hard thing he wishes he had not had to do and does not expect to be forgiven for it. You had hold of my man, he said. I told my people back at the start the day you took us, easy, no trouble, do what they say. I meant it. He glanced once briefly toward the young one, and the look was a whole language I could not read. Then you put hands on him. That changes the arrangement. That is not what I asked, I said. I asked how. You carried no weapon, you were processed, the scan was clean. And the old human said the thing I have not been able to set down since. Mister, he said, I am the weapon, you can't take that off me. It doesn't come off. I had it logged as the raving of a cornered animal. I walked away certain it was raving. It was not raving. It was the most accurate thing anyone said aboard the Answerin that watch, and the rest of my account is only the slow, instrument-by-instrument process by which my people were forced to admit he was correct. We do not, as a caste, accept a thing because a detainee says it. We accept a thing because the index can be made to hold it. So I took the capture to the analysis bay, and I did what a keeper does when the catalog has no entry. I measured. The first measure was velocity, and the velocity was the thing that emptied the room of every other question. The shard had left his fingers at a speed our instruments associate with mechanical launchers, not with a limb, never with a limb. No Veshtani arm can approach it. We are a strong people, broader and heavier than they are, and not one of us, straining with everything our musculature can give, can hurl a mass at a fraction of what the old human's worn arm did without apparent effort. I had my strongest guard attempt it, with the same shard in the same hold into a sensor target. The guard's best throw arrived at the target with the energy of a tossed pebble. It would have bruised. The humans had killed. The difference was not strength. My guard was far stronger than the human. The difference was in a mechanism the guard did not have, and the human did. And I bent the rest of that watch to understanding what the mechanism was. I had the medics bring me the deep scan they had taken of all 6 humans on intake, the same scan that had cleared them, and I read it again, not for hidden weapons this time but for the body itself. And the body itself was the hidden weapon. I am not a physician, but the index has taught me to read a machine, and the human shoulder, when I finally looked at it as a machine, is among the most alarming machines I have ever catalogued. It is built to throw. That is not a thing it can do. It is a thing it is for. The joint sits loose and open where ours sits closed and stable, trading the safety of a firm socket for a range of motion no sensible engineer would permit. Across that loose joint and down the limb runs tissue arranged exactly as a launcher's spring is arranged. Tendon and ligament positioned to be stretched by the wind-up of the arm and to snap back, returning the stored force as velocity. The human does not power the throw with muscle at the moment of release, the way our people would try to. The human powers it earlier in the great rotation of the trunk and stores that power in the stretched tissue of the shoulder and lets the tissue release it at the end like a catapult firing. The muscle is the winch. The tendon is the spring. The arm is the arm of the engine. I had been calling it a limb. It is ordnance that has grown a hand on the far end, so that it can also fold blankets and hand over its tools when asked. I sat with that scan a long time. I want to be honest about why it frightened me, because the fright was not the simple fright of a dead guard, terrible as that was. It was the fright of a keeper whose entire law had just been shown a door it could not close. Every doctrine my caste lives by rests on one assumption, that the weapon and the being are separable. We strip the detainee, and the threat is gone because the threat was the thing we stripped. We rank a species by its arsenal because the arsenal is a thing it carries, makes, holds, and can be parted from. The whole tower of our security, the empty cells, the deep scans, the Tier 4 file that says harmless, stands on the certainty that you can take a being's weapons away. And here was a being from whom you could take everything, every tool, every edge, every charge, scan him to the root and find nothing, walk him naked into a stripped room, and he would still be armed, because his weapon was bolted to his spine at birth and grew with him, and could not be confiscated by any procedure we possessed short of removing the arm itself. There is no such thing as disarming a human. I wrote that sentence in my own hand before I brought it to anyone, because I needed to see whether it would survive being written, and it did. I want to be careful here, because in the retelling it would be easy to make the human into a monster, and that is not the truth, and it is not what frightened us most. The truth is that Garrett Soil was not a monster and was not, by his own people's measure, anything remarkable. When I had the full intake reviewed, I learned what he was: a salvage hand. A working being near the end of a working life, with no record of soldiering, no augment, no training my analysts could find that would explain the throw. His crew were the same: haulers, cutters, a cook, the frightened young one, not warriors, not elite. When I understood that, the fright doubled because it meant the arm was not the mark of a soldier. It was standard. It was what their bodies simply were. The cook had it. The young one had it. The old one had only been the one with the will to use it, and the will had come not from training but from the simplest thing in them, that we had put hands on one of their counted 6. I went back to the hold once more before I took it to the index. I do not fully know why. I told myself it was for the record. I think now it was something nearer to needing to look the fact in the face while it still wore a face. Your people, I said to him through the partition, all of them, they can do what you did. Sure, he said it the way you confirm the weather. Any of us, it's not a trick, kids do it. We've been doing it longer than we've been anything you'd call people. He turned the worn hand over and looked at it as though it belonged to someone he had known a long time. There was a stretch, way back before tools, before fire, even long time, where the throwing was the whole thing we had. couldn't outrun the things that wanted to eat us, couldn't outfight them. But we could stand off at a distance and put a rock through them before they ever closed. That's the deal that made us. Everything else came after. He looked back up at me, and there was no boast in it at all, only that weariness. You took our knives and our cutters and our little strikers, and you felt safe. I get it. Makes sense the way you do things, but you didn't take anything that mattered. We had that before we had knives. We are the knife. The knives were just us getting comfortable. I have served the Index 41 cycles, and I have catalogued the weapons of more species than I can name in a sitting, and I have never been spoken to by an armament before. I went and made my report. The Index does not convene for a single death. A guard is a guard. The catalogue is older and larger than any one of us, and a keeper who runs to the tribunal over one casualty is a keeper who has lost his measure. I did not bring them a death. I brought them a reclassification, and that is a thing the Index has not heard a keeper request in longer than the standing record holds. I stood before the assembled adjudicators, 3 of them, old beyond my own age, who between them carry more of the catalogue in memory than the archives hold in storage, and I laid the matter out in the only frame they would accept. I did not speak of fear. The Index has no entry for fear. I spoke of category. Our taxonomy of arms, I said, rests on the separability of the weapon from the wielder. Every entry in the Index, from the first blade to the latest coil, is a thing a being carries and can be made to surrender. Our entire doctrine of holding, the strip, the scan, the empty cell, the tier, is the operational expression of that one principle. I am here to report that the principle has an exception, and that the exception is the human. I gave them the velocity. I gave them the scan of the shoulder read as a machine. I gave them my strongest guard's failed throw beside the worn old human's lethal one, the same shard, the same room, the difference written in the numbers and impossible to argue with. I gave them the intake records that showed the man was no soldier, that the arm was standard issue on the species, that any of the 6 could have done it, and the cook could have done it, and the frightened child could have done it. And then I gave them the sentence I had written in my own hand to see if it would survive. There is no procedure, I said, by which a human may be disarmed. The weapon is anatomical. It cannot be confiscated, scanned out, or stripped because it is not carried. It is grown. By the operating definition this Index has held since its first entry, every member of the species must be classified as permanently armed in every condition, including the condition we have until now called harmless. The hold was very quiet. The eldest of the 3, a keeper before I was hatched, whose memory holds entries lost from the archives, looked at me for a long while, and when she spoke it was not to challenge me. It was to test whether I had understood my own report. Then the Tier 4 classification, she said. Cannot apply to them, I said. Tier 4 means unarmed. There is no condition in which a human is unarmed. Tier 4 applied to a human is a clerical error that gets guards killed. And the empty cell protects us from a Veshtani, I said. It does not protect us from a human, because emptying the room does not empty the human. We have been holding them by a doctrine built for beings who can be parted from their weapons. They cannot be parted from theirs. We have been keeping armed beings in rooms designed for unarmed ones and congratulating ourselves on our security. The second adjudicator, who had been silent, asked the question that I think will outlive all of us. Then how, he said, do you hold a being you cannot disarm? I did not have an answer, and I told them I did not. I am a keeper of the armory. My entire art is the art of separating a being from its weapon, of reducing the dangerous to the safe by the simple operation of taking the dangerous thing away. Faced with a being from whom the dangerous thing cannot be taken, my art has nothing to offer but the admission of its own limit. We could hold them, yes, behind vacuum locks, at distance, never within reach of debris, never within the open service gap of a partition, treating a Tier 4 salvage hand with the precautions we reserve for a primed munition. We could do all of that, but we could not do the thing our doctrine was built to do. We could not make them safe. We could only manage them armed forever, and hope our management did not lapse, the way it had lapsed over a finger's length of ceramic spar that a maintenance arm left behind. The index ruled. It does not rule quickly, and it did not rule quickly then, but in the end it entered the finding, and the finding is why I am setting this down, because the entry changed the first law of my caste, and a keeper who lives through such a change owes the record an honest account of how it happened. The old law was the one I had kept for 41 cycles without a tremor. A being you have disarmed is a being you have answered. The index struck it. In its place, it entered a clause I never thought to see, a clause that admits, in the dry language of the catalogue, that there exists a class of being for whom the operation of disarmament is undefined, for whom the weapon and the body are one object, manufactured together, surrendered only with the body itself. The humans were entered into the index, not as wielders. We have 10,000 wielders catalogued, and they are nothing to fear because you can take what a wielder wields. The humans were entered the way we enter a weapon, species as armament, the first such entry the catalogue holds. I released the crew. I want that recorded too. There was argument for holding them, for studying them, for the cold uses a frightened caste can imagine, and I would not have it, and for once my rank was enough to settle the matter. They had powered down their tender without a fight. They had opened their own locks. The old one had told his people to give us no trouble and had meant it, and had broken his own word only when we put hands on the youngest of them. And I had come, slowly, by way of every instrument I trusted, to understand that this was not savagery, but the oldest arithmetic their species keeps, that you count your own, and you do not let one of the count be taken, and the body you were issued before you had knives will see to the rest whether you wish it to or not. I gave them back their tender. I gave them back their tools, the knives and the cutters and the little strikers, the things we had felt so safe to take. I understood by then that taking them had never made us safe at all. It had only made us feel it. Garrett Soyle stopped at the lock before he crossed back to his own vessel. He looked at me with that worn, weary patience, and through the translator he said one last thing, and I have entered it in no log because it is not a thing the index has a field for. "I'm sorry about your man," he said. "I am. He was just doing his job. So was I." He flexed the hand once, the catapult, the spring, the arm of the engine, hanging there as ordinary as anything in the world. "We don't mean to be what we are. We just are it. Easier on everybody if you remember that next time instead of finding out." Then the salvage crew of haulers and cutters and a cook and a frightened child and one old man who was the weapon went back across into their patched little tender. 6 in, 6 accounted for, and we let them drift off into the virile shelf, and I went back to my armory. I keep it differently now. The racks are the same and the catalogue is current as it always is, but I no longer feel what I used to feel standing among the answered weapons, that clean certainty that the dangerous, once stripped and stored, is finished. I think about the empty cell. I think about how proud we were of it, how the whole tower of our security stood on the emptying of a room, and how a worn old arm at the end of a working life turned a forgotten splinter into a thing my index had to be rewritten to hold. I think, more than I would like, about how many of them there are, and how the cook could have done it, and how any of them, in any room we have ever called safe, was armed the whole time and waiting only on the will. We are a careful people. We catalogue everything. And the deepest entry in our catalogue now, the one I check before any other when a human crosses my lock, is the shortest and the worst. It does not list a blade or a charge or a yield. It lists no weapon at all because there is nothing to list and nothing to take. It says only, "Do not disarm them." You cannot. They are already and always the weapon. Hold them as you would hold a thing that is primed, or do not hold them, but never again make the error we made on the Ansarin. Never again look at the open hand and the empty room and the clean scan, and write the word harmless and walk away.